So good to see everyone this afternoon. According to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the word exegesis is an explanation or critical interpretation of a text. Essentially, this is where you look at each word in the text and then you draw meaning from that word. Then you put together the words in order to determine what the passage actually means. Well, the term exegesis is contrasted with the Greek term eisegesis. Merriam-Webster dictionary defines eisegesis as the interpretation of a text, such as the Bible, by reading into it one's own ideas. So exegesis is where you dig into the scriptures, and then you find out what those scriptures actually say, and so using exegesis is a search for the truth. But eisegesis is where you use the Bible, search the Bible to figure out how you can find a way to support what you already believe. You have a conclusion in search of support. And the conclusion or belief might be right or it might be wrong, but the more sure way to find the truth is to seek out what the scriptures actually say, which is exegesis, and then follow the truth. Digging through the scriptures does take some effort, but it is essential. If we take a look in Isaiah 28 and verses 9 through 11, I'm reading out of the New King James today. Isaiah 28 verses 9 through 11. Whom will he teach knowledge, and whom will he make to understand the message? Those just weaned from milk, those just drawn from the breast? In other words, will a baby be teaching us? For precept must be drawn upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. Well, today I want to take a small passage from the Bible and enlarge our understanding of it, and then we can better see the meaning of other scriptures. So let's turn to 3 John, the book of 3 John, just before near the end of the Bible. 3 John, it's only one chapter, and look at verse 13. In 3 John, verse 13. Whereas John, the apostle, writes, I have many things to write, but I do not wish to write to you with pen and ink. So this apostle John closes the book of 3 John by referring to pen and ink. If we look at Strong's exhaustive concordance, we can derive meaning from the original language in which John wrote the verse. So if we take a look at the word ink, is Strong's number 3188. And the root word of ink is the Greek word melon, which means black. Well, the ink of the first century, when the Apostle John was writing, was a mixture of soot or lamp black. When I was a boy on the farm, the electricity from regional power suppliers, the co-ops, would go out from time to time if there was a windstorm or an ice storm, and our household would then be in the dark. So my parents would get out the old kerosene or oil lamps, and if you've ever used a kerosene or an oil lamp, the glass chimney of the lamp, as you know, will collect soot or carbon if the wick of the lamp is not properly trimmed. Even today, we in our house keep a few oil lamps in the home in the event of a power outage, and we've used those lamps from time to time. Well, in the first century, this black soot was mixed with a rubbery gum, and the rubbery gum was used as an adhesive to make the ink, as they called it, stick to the paper. So the ink of the first century in the time of the Apostle Paul was a mixture of black soot and some adhesive. So the word pen that's used in 3 John verse 13 is Strong's number G2563. The pen that John was referring to isn't a ballpoint pen like we're referring to today, but rather the pen of the first century was more like a fountain pen that uses a little metal point. Well, the first century pen was made by making a diagonal cut on a hard reed. The hard reed had a sharp point, and that was used as a writing device or pen, as we would call it. And from time to time, that sharpened point of that reed pen would become dull and require sharpening. And then the writer would take the tip of his reed pen and use a little bit of volcanic stone. We call it pumice stone. And this pumice stone can still be purchased today to use as an abrasive, the soft porous stone that is often used to grate calluses off from skin. Well, and that would be used then to sharpen the end of this hard reed. The black ink or soot was a mixture of lampblack and adhesive, and it was sold as a dry mixture. And then, just before someone would use it, they would mix a little bit of water to this ink mixture to get it the right consistency, and then they could dip in the reed to write on papyrus, which is an early form of paper. Then when the ink dried on the paper, it was only on the surface. It didn't really soak in. It stuck on the surface by the adhesive. But if the writer made a mistake, then this first century writer could take a wet rag or a wet sponge, and they could remove the erroneous writing. They could wipe it out. Now, originally I thought I was going to entitle this sermonette, Wiped Out. But then I realized the wiped out term came into effect in 1965 and usually referred to people who were drunk or wasted in that sense. So I thought maybe that's not the best title. So we're going to title this one Blotted Out. When I was in college, I purchased a special kind of typewriter paper, and it would allow me to use an eraser and erase the mistakes that I had typed. And then after I erased the mistakes that I typed, I had to perfectly line up the paper so that I could type the correct word or phrase in. Later on, in business, I had an electric typewriter, an IBM Selectric. And this was a fancy typewriter, had some limited memory, and it would use a black ink ribbon. It also had a special white ribbon so that it could back up, remember what you had done, and then you could retype over it with the white ribbon, and it would blank out the black text. So once it was blanked out, you could then retype something over that. And that we thought was just the cat's meow at that time. Pretty neat device. Well, today we have word processors. And that allows us to correct mistakes on a computer screen right while we're writing it. And we even have spell checkers to tell us if the word is misspelled, or grammar checkers to make sure that we have plural or singular tense or past tense agreeing with various parts of the sentence. And the misspelled words are underlined in red, and the grammar checker is underlined in blue. Well, in 1787, the United States early government founders created a constitution using pen and ink. Well, now we have transcribed that original text into computerized fonts, and the Constitution has been amended 27 times. Well, when we read a copy of the Constitution, the amended version, it still contains all of the original text, but they take and put dotted lines through the items, through the deleted portions of it or amended portions. The whole text is still there. You can read it, both the original deleted portions and the current amended version. The same thing is true with proposals to laws considered whether it's by Congress or various state legislatures. The proposed deletions then have horizontal lines dotted through them, and then the additions would be added in italics to make it so that you could read through it and see what's the old, what's the new, what's the difference. But nothing is blotted out. We can see the original and the additions and in the deletions. Well, the Apostle John had the technology of his day, fresh mixed ink and a reed pen. So why does this information about the ink and pen matter in the greater context of understanding the Bible? Understanding how pen and ink were used in the Bible helps us to realize what the writer was thinking about when certain passages were written. Let's take a look at Exodus 32. In Exodus 32, verse 32, and this is the time when the writer of Exodus, Moses, was using the term, blot me out of your book. Let's read Exodus 32, verse 32. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, I pray, blot me out of your book, which you have written. This is the time frame as when the children of Israel created a golden calf. God was very angry with them. Moses was up on the mountain receiving the tablets, and it was a very upsetting time. And so Moses said, look, Let me take the hit. Blot me out. I'll be the sacrifice for them, and let them live. So Moses asked to be the atonement, to blot him out for the sins of the people of Israel. Instead, we read on in Exodus 32, we find out God allowed the people to suffer for their sins. Then we read in Revelation 3:5, the reference that the Apostle John was writing when he referred to blotting out. In Revelation 3:5, he who overcomes shall be clothed in white garments, and I will not blot out his name from the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. So it's possible for people who were once converted to lose their salvation, to be removed from the book of life. So now, as we approach the Passover season, it's our job individually to ask God to blot out the sins from our life, to remove our faults and shortcomings. When we ask God then to help us as we repent and change our ways, to turn and do better, it becomes our challenge to overcome. In the alternative, we should know that it's possible that our names could be, as John wrote, blotted out of the book of life, just as the ancient writers would take a wet sponge and blot out the words that shouldn't be there, as if those words had never been written. Well, we can be thankful that the blotting out of a person's life does not occur unless the person fails to repent and change their direction. The small phrase, pen and ink, is used only 3 times in the Bible. Yet using the methodology of exegesis, we can lift meaning from even the smallest scriptures to give us understanding that is profitable for salvation.